Mesdames et messieurs, merci de votre présence. Nous allons reprendre, on va reprendre en anglais, comme on a parlé pas mal français en fin d'après-midi hier. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to talk about public-private partnerships. As you know, illicit trade is a multi-million dollar activity. It hurts governments in terms of revenues, legal businesses and consumers alike. Just one or two figures. Approximately 600 billion illicit cigarettes are consumed annually in the world, and this alone costs governments $40 to $15 billion every year. And there's more and more evidence of the link between all kinds of illicit trade and financing of terrorist groups and their activities. So we're going to talk about this today. We're delighted to have with us a very prestigious panel. Jack Radish, who's Senior Project Manager at the OECD High Level Risk Forum. Alvise Giustiniani, I knew I was going to get that difficult, Vice President Illicit Trade Strategies and Prevention at Philip Morris International. Jean-Baptiste Carpentier, who is, the title in French, Commissaire à l'information stratégique et à la sécurité économique au Ministère de l'économie, de l'industrie et du numérique. And Tom Keatinge, with an E at the end of his name, which he's very proud of, Director, Center for Financial Crime and Security Studies, RUSI. Can we give them a big round of applause, first of all, because they've given of their time, and it always puts them into form. Just for those who were not in the debates yesterday, the way we do things, 5 or 6 minutes introductory statements, so we know where you're coming from. Then I'll ask you some questions on what you have said, and then I will come into the floor for your questions. So let's start, first of all, with Jack. If you can give us a general overview of the way that the OECD thinks about public-private partnerships within the context of illicit trade.
I'd be happy to. Thank you very much.
Just one thing. Interpreters are locked away. They can only hear in the microphone, so we had to put the microphone against the chin.
Against the chin.
Perfect.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. The OECD, about 4 years ago, started a task force on charting illicit trade. And it's a very different type of body within the OECD because it brings together with its member countries and the officials of its member countries, representatives from industries, from think tanks, from NGOs, from academia, because really this is where the expertise is found when it comes to countering illicit trade and understanding what's going on in the broader world. So bringing together this expertise, the idea was to share a good practice, whether it's in terms of policies that could reduce levels of illicit trade, that is to say, to reduce the opportunities to make profit from it, as well as identifying some of the governance gaps that exist in countries which can be targeted for transit points. Before I go further, I want to play a little video for you that's going to present some of the research the OECD itself has done, if they could key that.
Top video.
Each year, countries trade goods worth trillions of dollars, from aspirin to zucchini. Yet according to worldwide customs data collected and analyzed by the OECD and the EU's Intellectual Property Office, of all the imports entering countries by air, ship, road, or rail, 2.5% are counterfeit or pirated goods. For the European Union, 5% of all imports are fake. OECD analysis estimates that the global trade in counterfeit and pirated products is worth $461 billion a year, around the same as the illicit drug trade, and is rising. This estimate, the most rigorous to date, is based on some 500,000 customs seizures around the world between 2010 and 2013. Yet it's a conservative figure, as it excludes online piracy. The profits often go to organized crime. The fake goods crop up in every sector, from luxury handbags, watches, and perfume, to machine parts and chemicals. Customs officials have even found counterfeit bananas and strawberries that infringe trademarks. Most seriously, fake medicines that slip past customs threaten the health and safety of those who use them unknowingly. Counterfeit trade means lost company revenues and lower taxes for governments. It hurts society, and it discourages firms from doing costly but important research into new products or medicines. Most counterfeit goods are made in middle-income and emerging economies, with China in first place. These countries have the infrastructure for large-scale trade, but many lack the institutions and legislation needed to crack down on counterfeit trafficking. Tougher regulations and closer international cooperation can help stem the flow of fakes.
Donc, si je peux souligner juste quelques chiffres clés de ces présentations en français, au cas où que l'interprétation n'était pas aussi rapide que le déroulement de ces vidéos, c'est-à-dire 5% des imports dans l'Union européenne en 2013 étaient de contrefaçon, 5%, et la valeur estimée à 85 milliards d'euros. Et sur l'échelle mondiale, 2,5% des importations étaient de contrefaçon, à une valeur estimée 461 milliards d'euros. Donc, il s'agit des montants énormes. And the question is, how much of these revenues are going to organized crime and to further continuing organized crime activity in some very malicious and sinister activities, not just counterfeit goods, but perhaps terrorist activity. I'd like to also talk about the report of the task force that I mentioned earlier that was released. This is available on the OECD website, Illicit Trade, Converging Criminal Networks. This research is coming from the experts in the task force, world experts recognized in their field, covering sectors of illicit trade from wildlife crime, counterfeit medicine, counterfeit tobacco products, alcohol, narcotics, and human trafficking. So I encourage all of you who are interested to have a look at this report as well as the counterfeit study, which is also available on the OECD website. Just to take a few statistics out of that book, of the counterfeit study and the illicit trade book, they both have these statistics as well. 1/4 of alcoholic beverages in Latin America are unbranded or trademark infringing. In 2013, the United Kingdom estimated it lost between 1.3 and 2.4 billion pounds in tax revenue due to the illicit alcohol market. So we're talking about a huge amount of money lost to governments, a huge amount of money made to traffickers. And this is the convergence of interest between the private sector and the public sector that I hope this panel can look at more closely in terms of what could be done to counter this activity.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. Jack, Alvise, obviously the cigarette industry is very exposed to counterfeit activity. Can you tell us a little bit your take on this and also about private-public partnerships?
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, sure. Public-private partnership. Why Philip Morris? Why cigarettes? I think the starting point is the numbers that went on the screen, and you also mentioned it. There's 600 billion cigarettes smoked illegally in the world every year. Just to give you the dimension and to make a bit understand what it means is, give or take, is like 10 times the consumption of cigarettes in France. And France is a big country. So the problem is huge. And in Philip Morris, we strongly believe that the only way to solve the issue is a public-private partnership. And let me try to explain you why. The problem is a very, very complex issue. People see only maybe the tip of the iceberg, which is buying a pack on the street corner and maybe saving $2, $3, $4 or euros, depending where you buy it. Now, the problem is much more complex than that. And you look at the drivers of the problem is that clearly the price differential. In Europe, prices of cigarettes in France are different than in Belgium, than in Germany, than in Greece. So there's clearly a smuggling within Europe. And if you go outside Europe, you can buy a pack of Marlboro for less than €1 in a country like Ukraine. And you can buy it legally in that country. So the incentive for smugglers is there. And just to give you a figure, if you buy a container of cigarettes in a grey part of the world, you can pay maybe $100,000 for it. If you successfully smuggle it into a high-price market like the UK, you can make up to $2 million. Clearly, you're not going to make it all because you have to. It's going to be cuts through the chain. But clearly, you can see that you buy for $100,000, you sell it for $2 million, you can make a lot of money. I'm not trying to give you any kind of ideas, but the incentive the reward is huge. Second driver is the penalties. How many people do you know or you see on the news that end up in prison for smuggling cigarettes? You see many or you hear many people that end up in jail smuggling drugs. So the penalties for smuggling cigarettes is very low. Therefore, what kind of business do you know where it has a high rewards and low risk? And clearly that attracts a lot of business people, which are organized crime and so on. A second driver is that the attention on the smuggling of cigarettes is not really so high. It's considered a petty crime. Governments and law enforcement are interested to tackle other issues, and rightly so, like smuggling of arms, of drugs, and trafficking of human beings, and so on. So in the chain of importance, the smuggling of cigarettes is low. Last point, driver is the consumers. I think the demand is there, and consumers, for the reasons I mentioned beforehand, they see that they can save some money, and they don't see the consequences of their actions, which is fueling organized crime, and in some instances also terrorism. So this is to show that the problem is a very complex problem, and there is no easy solution. At least I don't know any easy solution. In Philip Morris, we have not come up with any silver bullet that can tackle the issue. So the only way ahead is really a public-private partnership where the different actors can put on the table their competencies. We as an industry have a lot of know-how about the industry, obviously, because it is our business. We sell cigarettes. We can put financial resources. On the other side, the public side, governments can change laws. They can enforce laws. But in this public-private partnership, I think we should also include NGOs. We should include the trade. So it's a complex issue, and only if each actors in this place's role, we can come to a constructive and long-term solution. So that's why we really strongly believe in this public-private partnership.
Where you talk about your know-how, obviously about what you produce, what is your knowledge of the illicit trade? Can you actually bring that to the table too?
Sure. Look, there's a lot of information out there, and strangely enough, it is not like smuggling drugs, where it's all undercover. Cigarettes are big quantities. You have containers, so you cannot really smuggle containers and containers just overnight and so on. It's done in the daylight, and there's to give you an example, we know that the free trade zones around the world are black holes where product goes in. And you can take a free trade zone like in Dubai, where we know that, because it's all in the bill of lading of the shipments, or the ships, you have 100 containers going in of tobacco and 20 coming out. So what happens with our 80? It's a black hole that goes, and this is just one piece of information which we are sharing with law enforcement, and that sometimes with some issues, which we can go on later, action is taken, the seizure is taken, there is illicit factories which are then taken down, and that's one way of cooperation with law enforcement.
Okay, let's stay in English with Tom, first of all. Tell us your take on the public-private partnerships which could be set up.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. So I run a program at the Royal United Services Institute called the Centre for Financial Crime and Security Studies. We set that up a couple of years ago, and we set that up specifically because the UK government in late 2013 decided that economic crime, financial crime, was a national security threat to the UK, and that one of the ways that they were going to address this threat was by engaging the private sector in the struggle to combat financial crime. And so the program that I run basically tracks that effort. We run a number of research projects that looks at the way in which public and private partnership can create a step change in disrupting certain types of crime. So where finance is an important factor. So obviously terrorist financing is a key focus, human trafficking and human smuggling, the illegal wildlife trade, and then sanctions busting, so proliferation finance, for example. Obviously, this issue has come into a lot of focus over the last 2 years, let's say, since Islamic State burst into the headlines, because so much of the focus of the international community has been on that organization's finance and the way in which the private sector can help the public sector disrupt the financial flows, understand how the oil industry works, understand how antiquities trading works. So we look at public-private partnership from how it can augment the disruption of these crimes. And at the heart of much of what we look at is the fact that from a security perspective, the key issue that the authorities grapple with is data ownership. So governments do not own all the data, don't have access to all the data that they would like to have in order to fulfill the security mandate that they have. And obviously the most common example of that is communications data. But there is another example, which is perhaps less well known, but has come into sharp relief in the last 6 months following the investigation of the attacks in Paris and now in Brussels, and that is the financial data that's owned by banks. Banks cannot access that data. They can't easily intercept it as they can with communications data. So the question is, how do they, if you like, force the banking sector to enter into a partnership arrangement? I think it's interesting to look at the way that the banking sector and governments work together to get an understanding of what I think is probably, in some countries, state-of-the-art partnership. So just to give you very brief examples, partnership between the banking sector or the financial sector generally and governments is legally mandated. There is no choice. You have to partner, and you have to partner because, as many people probably know, banks and other regulated entities have to file so-called suspicious activity reports with their financial intelligence unit if they spot information that they think is suspicious and that the authorities should be aware of. That's legally mandated. You are required to do that. In some countries, in the United States, for example, or in the UK, that model is built on by saying, okay, well, how do we make that less of an antagonistic, less of a transactional relationship? How do we use that as the cornerstone of building a partnership rather than just simply a legally and mandated required marriage? So, for example, in the UK, about a year ago, something called the Joint Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force was set up. This is a group of banks, remittance companies, governments, including the security service, that sit together to discuss trends and typologies that are affecting certain types of financial crime. It focuses on human trafficking, terrorist finance, corruption, and trade-based money laundering. And I sit on 2 of those expert groups, and I can tell you that in 12 months, the extent to which partnership in tackling financial crime in the UK has moved forward is actually quite incredible because of the partnership that has been created by that structure. Obviously, the advent of Islamic State has caused there to be considerable focus on the whole issue of partnership, as I mentioned earlier. The United Nations is very focused on the extent to which member states are partnering with their private sectors to understand how the financing of ISIS can be disrupted. So the United Nations has added its weight to this issue. And just a final word. One of the things that we've heard extensively following the terrorist attacks in Paris and Brussels has been a call for greater information exchange, greater sharing of information. And the question I have is, what do we actually mean by that? Do we mean more information? I don't think we do, because in my experience, the authorities are receiving more information than they can digest certainly from the banking system. Actually, what we mean is better information sharing. And the only way you can share better information, higher quality information, is if you are prepared to sit down together as public and private sector and compare notes in such a way that allows for a greater and more effective relationship. And if you want an example of why public-private partnership is so important, that's the example I would give you. Thank you.
What do you mean by better information?
So if you are a bank, the phone call you hate getting is a phone call late in the year that says, we've looked at the league table of suspicious activity report filing that has happened this year. You're the third biggest bank in the country. How come you're sitting at number 10 in the league table? So you are incentivized to pump out these reports without really thinking about what you're reporting. If the authority said to you, you know what, we are interested in the following profiles, we're interested in the following geographies, we're interested in the following typologies that intelligence tells us is something we should be concerned about, then instead of filing 100,000 of these SARs every year, which might have very little effectiveness, you file 2,000, all of which are high quality. So that's what I mean by better information.
Okay, right. Let's go into French now. Jean-Baptiste Carpentier, vous avez écouté donc vos collègues. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner quelques exemples, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de Français dans la salle, spécifiquement français?
Eh bien, je vais peut-être à ce moment-là également reprendre ma casquette antérieure à celle de la fonction que j'occupe actuellement, puisque avant d'exercer cette fonction de commissaire en charge de la sécurité économique, j'exerçais la fonction de directeur de TACFIN, TACFIN étant la cellule de renseignement financier, la Financial Intelligence Unit, qui est en charge précisément, comme Tom vient de l'expliquer, d'assurer ce dialogue constant entre les parties publiques et le secteur financier. Alors, peut-être d'abord quelques mots plus généraux, très rapidement, en rappelant que la France n'a pas une tradition longue comme l'ont les pays anglo-saxons de dialogue entre le secteur public et le secteur privé. On a une vision peut-être plus régalienne des choses et pendant de longues années, l'État s'est considéré comme différent de nature par rapport au secteur privé. Les choses ont très largement changé depuis une trentaine d'années et notamment des dispositifs à l'instar de ceux mis en place par le GAFI, le FATF, ont participé à cette mise en place progressive d'un dialogue entre le secteur public et le secteur privé. Je dois dire que ce dialogue n'a pas toujours été facile. Il a fallu parfois expliquer autant à l'État d'ailleurs aux entreprises quel était leur intérêt, mais à la base, il faut bien comprendre que l'économie, ça repose sur la confiance. S'il n'y a pas de confiance sur un territoire où s'exercent des échanges, il n'y a plus d'économie possible. Je vais prendre un exemple qui montre à quel point l'absence de sécurité économique peut totalement détruire l'économie. C'est par exemple l'expérience très malheureuse que nous avons eue en Europe et en France du marché des droits au carbone, où le marché des droits carbone mis en place, tel qu'il avait été mis en place en 2008, à peu près ouvert en mois de juin-septembre 2008. En décembre 2008, nous avions des éléments permettant de considérer que ce marché était à plus de 90%, était gangréné par des organisations de crime organisé, qui s'est traduit par la plus vaste fraude financière jamais connue en Europe, avec des enjeux de plusieurs milliards d'euros disparus en France, en Allemagne, en Italie et dans les principaux pays européens. Et donc, en fait, on a vu complètement, alors même qu'on avait voulu créer une économie particulière des droits au carbone, pour de très bonnes raisons environnementales, cette économie a finalement dû être réformée totalement et changée, car nous ne pouvions plus fonctionner telle qu'elle avait été mise en place. Alors, là-dessus, on ne peut que souscrire à ce qui vient d'être dit. Une bonne partie de la sécurité économique, justement, ne peut reposer que sur le dialogue entre le secteur public et le secteur privé. D'abord, l'économie, c'est d'abord le fait des acteurs privés. C'est pas l'État est un acteur économique, certes, mais un acteur économique de second rang. Par ailleurs, ne nous voilons pas la face, dans l'ensemble des pays occidentaux, les budgets publics sont plutôt en réduction. Donc, on a besoin de douaniers pour contrôler les cargaisons de cigarettes, mais il y a plutôt moins de douaniers aujourd'hui qu'il n'y en avait, pour de très bonnes raisons, il y a 20 ans. Donc, il y a forcément besoin d'échanges entre le secteur public et le secteur privé. Ces échanges peuvent se faire de deux façons. On a des échanges qui sont formalisés. Ce sont l'exemple qui a été expliqué par Tom est probablement le meilleur exemple. Ce dispositif mis en place par le FATF GAFI en matière de lutte contre les flux financiers clandestins organise de façon extrêmement rigoureuse un système d'échange d'informations. Le secteur privé est obligé de transmettre à un organisme spécifique, qui est la Financial Intelligence Unit, dans chaque pays, un certain nombre d'informations, ces informations étant ensuite redispatchées par la FIU auprès des différentes agences gouvernementales en charge de lutter contre les différents crimes financiers qui ont, le cas échéant, été découverts. Alors effectivement, c'est un système qui repose largement sur le dialogue. D'ailleurs, le dialogue n'est pas toujours le même. Mon collègue britannique, effectivement, rappelle à juste titre les débats que nous avons sur la qualité et le nombre d'informations. Mon homologue du Royaume-Uni recevait 250 000 à peu près informations annuelles, quand nous, en France, nous en recevons cette année environ 40 000. Vous voyez que le dialogue que nous avons n'est pas le même. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'il est meilleur au Royaume-Uni qu'en France ou en France au Royaume-Uni. Ça veut dire que nous sommes, dans le cadre de notre échange avec les banques, nous avons dit que nous souhaitions avoir peut-être un peu moins effectivement d'informations que nos collègues britanniques, mais peut-être de meilleure qualité. Mais les choses peuvent changer en fonction des circonstances. La lutte contre le terrorisme, ce ne sont pas les mêmes informations que la lutte contre le trafic de cigarettes. Tout ceci nécessite un dialogue. Alors, il y a ce dialogue formel, qui est donc organisé, qui nécessite, dans la plupart des pays démocratiques, un cadre juridique précis et organisé. Il y a aussi, et là je terminerai par là, la nécessité, je crois profondément, d'organiser un dialogue informel, parce que tout ne peut pas passer par des canaux organisés, des lignes bien droites et bien claires. Et là, c'est effectivement davantage la fonction que j'exerce actuellement au sein d'une structure nouvellement créée dans l'État français, qui est donc le service de l'information stratégique et de la sécurité économique, qui a notamment pour vocation à échanger de façon très informelle, très...
Informel, ça veut dire
informel.
Quoi ça veut dire quoi?
C'est-à-dire qu'il n'y a pas d'obligation pour les entreprises de venir nous voir. Simplement, nous offrons aux entreprises une capacité, un lieu dans lequel elles peuvent nous dire ce qu'elles ont à dire, elles peuvent nous faire part d'informations discrètement, qui sont d'ailleurs peut-être des informations grises. Je n'ai pas besoin de tout connaître, mais il n'y a pas d'obligation. Simplement, nous pouvons échanger, nous pouvons dialoguer, nous pouvons traiter avec les entreprises des alertes précoces, nous pouvons recevoir des signaux faibles, des signaux sur lesquels il y a... C'est très évanescent, on ne sait pas exactement ce qui se passe, mais on a besoin de pouvoir échanger parce que l'entreprise est aux premières loges de la captation d'informations, mais l'État dispose de moyens dont ne disposera jamais l'entreprise. Après, moi, j'ai d'autres moyens que l'entreprise. Je peux croiser ces informations avec d'autres éléments. Et notre rôle, c'est ensuite, à partir de cet échange d'informations, d'essayer d'établir effectivement des cartographies des risques, des risk assessment, des hiérarchisations. Tout n'est pas grave. Il y a des choses, en revanche, qui sont très graves. Il y a des choses qu'il faut connaître rapidement. Je terminerai avec une image que j'ai souvent. La météo, c'est pas quelque chose de très difficile. Simplement, pour faire une météo à peu près correcte, on a besoin de connaître la direction du vent, la température, la pression et quelques éléments. À partir de là, n'importe qui, ou en tout cas beaucoup de gens, sont capables de dire approximativement quels sont les risques de voir l'orage tomber à tel endroit. Et c'est ça qu'on va essayer de faire. Et ça nécessite des lieux de dialogue totalement informels qui ne sont pas régis par des règles rigoureuses, mais qui permettent, en totale confidentialité, en totale confiance aussi entre l'acteur public et l'acteur privé, de s'échanger des informations dans le respect évidemment strict des rôles de chacun. L'État a également des intérêts qui ne sont pas nécessairement ceux de l'entreprise et il ne s'agit pas de faire du mélange des genres. Mais si nous n'arrivons pas à dialoguer dans des lieux informels et discrets, nous n'arriverons jamais à échanger ce type d'informations qui sont captées par les entreprises mais dont elles-mêmes n'ont pas les moyens, qu'elles-mêmes n'ont pas les moyens de traiter.
Alors, c'est un peu paradoxal ce que je vais faire parce que c'est le britannique qui devient plus régalien que le français. Mais quelle est la motivation pour les entreprises, si c'est si informel et si sympathique comme ça, mais de venir vous voir? Je ne comprends pas tout à fait leur motivation si ce n'est pas régalien et imposé par l'État.
Parce que j'essaie, pourtant là nous allons inverser les rôles, mais nous essayons de convaincre, et parfois cela arrive, les entreprises qu'elles-mêmes ont un intérêt objectif à ce qu'il y ait une zone de sécurité économique. C'est-à-dire, une entreprise de fabrication de cigarettes a tout intérêt à aller discuter avec la douane ou une administration quand elle est au courant d'une fraude majeure. Une entreprise qui est un acteur de marché comme ce que nous avons eu en matière de droit à carbone, s'il ne vient pas, c'est que ça a été le premier à voir qu'il se passait quelque chose de curieux sur ce marché, lui-même a un intérêt majeur à discuter avec l'État de ce qu'il se passe. Il ne pouvait pas savoir précisément, mais il voyait qu'il y avait des choses qui étaient étranges, qui étaient contre la logique économique. Et leur intérêt propre est effectivement d'avoir une règle du jeu respectée par à peu près tout le monde, parce que la première victime de tout cela, c'est certes peut-être l'État en termes de recettes fiscales ou de sécurité publique stricto sensu. Enfin, les entreprises sont elles-mêmes les victimes. Quand il y a des gens qui ne respectent pas les règles du jeu, ce sont ceux qui les respectent qui en sont victimes.
Yeah, I would just like to add on that to your question, Alex. I think exactly in a partnership, if it's forced one part on the other one, it's not going to work. I think there has to be the interest, and you put the trust. You have to understand the needs of each other, not to give 100,000 documents with only 10,000 of high quality. So the partnership has to be really working together. And we as an industry have clearly an interest to share the information, because these are smugglers which are taking away our market. And therefore there is our interest and economical interest. Governments have an interest because they are the biggest stakeholders in the tobacco industry, since 80% of the revenues go in excise tax and VAT. And also they have a social interest in order to, because of social impact with organized crime and so on. But I think fundamentally the partnership, the word says it has to be a partnership in exchanging information, know-how and so on. If it's forced from one on the other, it's not going to work. And that, I think, is a key point of going forward. And I think we're getting there, we're making improvement. And I think it's almost inevitable, because the organized crime the world is working as networks. You have the internet, you have interconnectivity, and the organizations which are in silos don't work anymore. You have institutions that are only in one area, one nation, are not going to be able to tackle the organized crimes, which are boundless and they can work throughout different countries. So international companies like Philip Morris, who have a footprint worldwide, I think they're exactly the way to go ahead. And I think it's almost inevitable in this world that this partnership we need to go on and building on them.
A question occurs to me. I'm listening to you, but I saw a report. I don't know if in your hotels you watch BBC World like I did, but there was a report this morning about the ivory trade in Hong Kong, and how the rules are very lax because it's been banned, and yet they still sell ivory. You talked about wildlife. They still sell ivory because supposedly it's ivory that was made 25 years ago before the ban. So we're not talking about a level playing field, because throughout the world there's various ways of getting around legislation anyway. This is a major problem, that not everybody plays according to the same rules, obviously.
Well, there is an international convention against this type of trade. Thank you. I'll put it closer. Whether people are abiding by it, clearly not. There's a huge amount of trafficking in ivory. To control that is very difficult. Rangers out in the bush to try to control the poachers are putting their lives at risk. This is a very dangerous proposition. There's a lot of money to be made, especially in rhino horn, actually. Much more so per ounce than ivory, elephant tusk. Huge amount of money to be made. And of course, rangers can be bought off. It's a big global problem, how to address this. International conventions are one way to go about it, but there has to be a law enforcement angle to it. There has to be a public-private partnership. The NGOs in Kenya, in Tanzania, in South Africa, who really keep track of the herd numbers, and then through the CITES and an NGO very well known named Traffic, does very good work with more local NGOs in Eastern Africa, keeping a track of when there is poaching going on, and feeding that information into local authorities and to customs to try to keep it from leaving the African continent. Also, in terms of public-private partnerships, they're also active in East Asia, working with the producers of traditional medicines to not use the actual substance, to use some synthetic substitute. And the underlying this trade is the thought that there is some active compound that has some benefits, some medicinal benefit. And if you can dispel that little by little, it's in the culture. You can't do that overnight. But working with some of the big producers of these medicines to say we do not use the real thing, it gets the message across.
Yes, I was going to say that, so in a way the question is, I think everybody agrees that working together makes sense, but then how come it doesn't happen as much as one would have thought if you buy into the fact that it's a positive thing? And why do you have to enforce partnership on people sometimes rather than it being kind of done informally? And this is when it starts to get interesting, because actually partnership is extremely difficult. You're asking organizations to share information with each other. They may have an issue with that from a competitive perspective. There is the small matter of data privacy, which people often run into, and it's interesting to see how the data privacy debate in Europe at the moment is shifting dramatically. I mean, I never thought I would see a German politician basically say, I think as de Maizière said recently, that at some point security is more important than data protection. So the information sharing is extremely difficult for lots of reasons, and you need, as an organization, you need to be willing, you need to see some benefit in grappling with that challenge. And even in the UK, where, let's face it, we're perhaps less concerned about privacy than our current continental cousins, possibly not after the 23rd of June. But the point is that we're less concerned about data privacy, I think, in the UK. Still, it's been a real struggle to bring people together to form these partnerships.
If I may pick up on the intervention from our French colleague, first to congratulate France on that initiative, and if it's successful, really we'd like to learn how that worked and try to replicate it in other countries through the OECD. There are big challenges to getting the private sector and public sector to work together, and those challenges might have nuances in different countries. When you think about a large trademark holder and their products being counterfeited, some of them, especially for products that are ingested into the human body, are very sensitive about that information getting out into the public. They don't want the consumers to think that if they buy that product, it might be something fake, not the real thing. So they prefer to keep that information, say, under the radar, and to take their own initiatives to track the activity wherever it's going on and put a stop to it, but quietly. And one can understand it's a question of brand reputation at the end, and they have a duty to their shareholders to go about this in a way that makes sense, it makes business sense. On the other hand, for the public sector, or say for law enforcement, sharing information has, I'm sure this audience can sympathize, some serious concerns as well. You don't want to share information about an ongoing investigation with just anyone. You might compromise the ability to successfully bring that investigation to conclusion. So where the modalities of having that information sharing, what can be shared legally, what can be shared and maintain the interests of your own side, they're to be defined. And if you have this sort of informal arrangement, I think it's a very good practice that we'd like to share more broadly.
Yeah, regarding information, I just would like to add one thing is it came up today, but it also came up yesterday, the difficulty of sharing information for the reason we just mentioned, antitrust, privacy, data privacy, and so on. One thing we are doing in the tobacco industry, and which is working quite well, is we're working with an NGO in the United States called NCFTA, which is I think a spin-off of the FBI, and the FBI put up this NGO exactly as a neutral platform to share information, so that the law enforcement and the private sector could share information in a neutral ground in order that the information that private sector was sharing didn't become classified as soon as they went to law enforcement, then we had no feedback from it. So it's really a platform where it's a brokerage house, I don't know how to define it in better terms, but it's really where private and public sectors can cooperatively share information and work together.
Let me ask Tom, what about these concerns about the data which is released, as Jack was saying, from medical companies? It's obviously much harder for them to put this kind of information out in any kind of partnership or out into the public at all. They feel it's escaping from them, and it's very sensitive information. And as you answer, I'll come into the audience. Si vous avez des questions, faites-moi signe.
So clearly, corporations are very concerned about their image. Where I see it most closely is in the financial sector, it took a lot for the banks to be willing to share information with law enforcement that might disclose that they had done something wrong. And building trust between law enforcement and the private sector such that kind of getting beyond that concern that the information that they share with law enforcement might backfire on them was a big issue. Clearly this information should not be made public. It should be used within the circle of trust that's developed in order to tackle the crime in question. But you are asking the private sector to take a big step, and I think often the public sector doesn't realise how challenging that decision is for a board or a CEO, whatever it might be, and needs to therefore kind of respect that decision in providing information back that is of equal quality.
Oui, bonjour, Gilles Penquin, membre de FITS. Petite question un peu générale. Est-ce que l'on a une idée de la part de la contrefaçon qui provient des sous-traitants des grandes sociétés mondiales qui font fabriquer dans des pays où, j'allais dire, l'ensemble des contraintes, qu'elles soient sociales, sanitaires, environnementales, sont faibles, mais où aussi il y a beaucoup de corruption. Et donc, est-ce que vous avez une idée de la part, dans la contrefaçon, de la part qui provient des sous-traitants des grandes entreprises? Et pour aller plus loin, est-ce qu'au final, si cette part était importante, si vous avez le chiffre, est-ce que les grands groupes, en ayant fait le choix de se délocaliser dans des pays où, j'allais dire, les contraintes légales sont faibles, n'ont pas en quelque sorte donné le bâton pour se faire battre?
Did you get that? When big companies outsource to other people who provide them with stuff in countries where the laws are less strict, to what extent are they also coming up with illicit goods themselves? If I've just badly translated what he said.
That's an interesting question. I can speak for Philip Morris. We do produce in many countries around the world. We have factories in Asia, Latin America, and so on. Clearly, all our products are controlled by us, and are all legal products that pay taxes in the country which they're produced. So I don't think, and I'm not aware of any case where there's been counterfeited products in our own factories. I mean, that is absurd. Maybe there is an employee that managed to smuggle out one or two shipping cases at night, but that's not really what we're talking about.
I guess one issue that I observe is that there is a pressure on standards that comes from, let's say, from Europe onto other countries. So just to give you an example from the finance sector, if you're operating in a country in, let's say, in Africa, if you don't meet the standards that your partner in Europe or in the US or elsewhere expects, then you don't get the service that you would want. So there is a certain level of kind of skills transfer and pressure on certainly in the finance sector for standards in those regions to rise, such that you can have relationships with international banks. It's a slightly different take on your question, but it gives you an example of the way that standards can be imposed on different regions.
Pour compléter et souscrire à ce qui vient d'être dit, il y a, sans répondre là aussi totalement à la question, mais il y a clairement une évolution marquée dans le droit international depuis quelques années, depuis une quinzaine d'années, qui fait que aujourd'hui un donneur d'ordre est de plus en plus responsable de toute la chaîne d'acteurs qu'il contrôle. Il y a 25 ans, si je puis dire, à la limite, pour reprendre par exemple une affaire que je ne citerai pas, mais qui est assez célèbre en France, un pétrolier qui s'échouait au large des côtes, on allait se poser la question de savoir, c'était la responsabilité du propriétaire du pétrolier. Et puis si on découvrait que c'était le pavillon du Panama, on allait chercher éventuellement l'assureur du pétrolier. Maintenant, ce n'est plus le cas. Aujourd'hui, toutes les compagnies pétrolières ont compris que, même d'ailleurs en termes de responsabilité extra-juridique, d'image, un pétrolier, globalement, est piloté au sens économique du terme par une compagnie pétrolière qui se trouve responsable du coup de l'état de ces pétroliers. Et on est responsable de toute la chaîne. Une structure financière, une banque, est effectivement responsable non seulement du flux financier stricto sensu qui passe entre ses livres, mais ça fait très longtemps maintenant qu'en matière financière, on n'est pas responsable que de son opération financière, mais on est responsable de la globalité non seulement de ce que l'on sait sur l'opération financière, mais de ce que l'on devrait savoir en amont et en aval, et ce que l'on est obligé de savoir. Nous avons à connaître, une banque doit connaître le bénéficiaire effectif d'une opération. C'est une obligation. Il y a quelques années, la banque vous aurait dit « ce n'est pas mon problème ». Après tout, c'est le problème de mon partenaire. Maintenant, ce n'est plus le cas. Une entreprise doit connaître comment, avec qui, par exemple, elle va travailler comme intermédiaire dans un pays, parce que sinon, elle va avoir quelques problèmes en matière de corruption. Donc, tout ça participe maintenant à une responsabilité qui s'étend, qui va de l'entreprise, mais en fait, maintenant, qui couvre l'ensemble de la chaîne de production et de la chaîne de valeur.
Just to add on that one, I fully subscribe. Companies, especially international companies, are held at much higher standards today than maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago. So programs like Know Your Customer are clearly something which we are doing in Philip Morris since 10, 15 years. So it's not that I sell to you and then it's no longer my problem. I want to know who you sell it to and who you sell it to. So, and we are held responsible for that. For that reason, we have also installed in our factories a track and tracing system since more than 10 years, which go in the shipping case, then down to the carton, then to the pack level. And we're going to be waiting now for regulations which are going to come up in Europe and in the world via the FCTC protocol. But in the meantime, we have as a company installed this track and tracing system because we cannot just close our blind eye. That is no longer what society is expecting, and things are moving on.
Sorry, sir. Mr. Giustiniani, I'd like to come back on this. It'd be interesting to have a look at I'm a journalist, sorry. It'd be interesting to have a look at the one specific geographical area in Europe, which is the Balkans. You have many operations there. You have, I think, a factory in Serbia. And, law enforcement authorities have been aware of what's going on in Montenegro. There was a lot of drug smuggling over there. So you're operating in a very risky area. It's some kind of a black hole in Europe. You can say there is some kind of lack of jurisdiction over there in terms of monitoring of illicit trade of cigarettes. So how do you operate in this volatile area called the Balkans?
That's a very good question, and unfortunately it's not the only difficult area, because there's around Europe quite a few areas which are difficult. There's Syria, there's Iraq, now North Africa, Libya, and so on. So in some of these countries we just don't sell. So we don't have sales in countries like Iran for the reasons that we cannot control a supply chain. What we do in these areas is what I was mentioning. We want to know who our customers are and who they sell to, and down the chain, in order to control a product. And I mentioned we have a track and tracing system on all our packs, in order to be able that we sell to you. Fine, you're a respectable customer, but then who you sell to, and try to find. So on this one is the activities we're doing. I was mentioning we started this many years ago. And hopefully these same standards which we apply to ourselves are going to be applied to other producers around the world. But there is no silver bullet to this, as I was mentioning at the beginning, and it is a solution that goes through partnership with different actors in the chain, which is the public sector, but it's also the trade, it's also NGOs, it's also civil society to sensibilize the consumers. So there is a things that we are doing, but clearly we need the support and we need the partnership with law enforcement, with governments, and so on. Just to give you some examples, more concretely, what we're doing is we signed an MOU with UNCTAD, which is a UN organization for trade and development. We signed it last year, not only Philip Morris, but also the other three big multinational companies. And on this one, we have a pilot project in Gibraltar, which is another area which there's a lot of product flowing out for different reasons, simply because the price is lower. So we have a pilot product there in order to, via UNCTAD, to track products in a better way. We have MOUs in Greece, which is another critical area. We gave them a scanner to scan containers. We work in the Baltics, which is another area which is there's a lot of product coming in from Belarus, and there we have programs with the law enforcement in order to support them financially with tools, but also with a reward program. So we give money to the government, and then they will reward their customs based on the seizures they have. So there are different programs, but once again, we as a company can do a lot, but we cannot solve the problem without a partnership with the governments, the trade, NGOs, and so on.
I wanted to come back to the previous question to say that with the statistics that we work with, the data we work with at the OECD, we cannot get down to that granular level whether we're talking about a subcontractor. The sources of our data are OECD trade data, UN trade data, World Customs Organization, DG Taxud, United States Custom and Border Patrol, seizure data. That said, I think you raise another point about corruption that is allowing that type of activity to go on. And I have respect to Professor Louise Shelley, who's here today, and who's brought to our attention some work that we could do to refine our research. It's worth looking into the extent that corruption is actually changing the quality of our information, talking about quality of data. We work with official government statistics, but if we wanted to get to probably a better picture, we could go further on a country basis and look to what extent corruption is keeping those figures that we receive much lower than they are in reality. So the 2.5% of world trade that's cited in our study is quite probably a lot higher.
Just, we have 3 minutes left, just perhaps a conclusion about the future for these public-private partnerships. How do you see them evolving in the next 10 years? Will they be much more accepted in 10 years' time? What will the obstacles of trust, which we're talking about, will they have been overcome?
Governments don't have the resources to tackle these crimes by themselves. That's the fundamental issue. That's what was acknowledged in the UK. That's why the UK is moving in the direction that it's moving. And I think that's an important acknowledgement, because what that means is that there is an openness to sit down and to deal, if you like, to trade with the private sector. I think that's the most important bridge that we've crossed in the UK. I'm sure it's been crossed in other countries. And as long as that acknowledgement remains, then I'm quite optimistic that actually these partnerships will grow, that good models will spread, and that, sounds hooey, but together we'll be better than working in our individual silos.
Une conclusion.
Peut-être juste pour, là aussi, souscrire avec peut-être quand même un petit bémol, c'est que je suis assez convaincu que dans les années à venir, le partenariat va s'étendre et que j'espère arriver à créer ce climat de confiance qui permette un dialogue et une coopération entre le secteur public et le secteur privé. Maintenant, la petite crainte que je peux avoir, c'est que je pense que ce dialogue ne sera tenable dans la durée que si il s'inscrit dans un strict respect des droits et libertés individuelles des citoyens eux-mêmes. C'est-à-dire qu'il ne faudrait pas que les citoyens eux-mêmes commencent à mettre en cause ce dialogue en ayant l'impression, et peut-être que là je me mettrais peut-être légèrement en petit bémol par rapport à mon collègue britannique, sur la question des données personnelles, car je pense que c'est un point sur lequel nous pouvons très bien avoir un retournement de l'opinion publique très rapidement si elle a l'impression que ces données personnelles, que leurs droits et libertés individuelles sont violés par ce genre de partenariat. Nous aurons l'opinion contre nous, et je pense qu'il faut faire extrêmement attention à ce que nous faisons.
I think I have no doubt that the public partnership is going to be strengthening in the future for the reasons you mentioned, that governments don't have resources, they don't have as much information as the private sector, but also for the reason I mentioned beforehand, that the world doesn't work anymore in hierarchical structure. It's a network. And therefore, you need to work beyond your borders. You need to cooperate among governments more and more. And you need also to cooperate with the industry, especially multinational ones, which have a worldwide footprint. So I think that's the way ahead.
Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. We could obviously continue for some time, but it was a very interesting discussion full of concrete examples. Thank you very much. Vous pouvez les applaudir. Merci. Thank you.